everyone, welcome to PRH's Summer of Reading. My name is Amie Kaufman, and today I am here with some incredible authors to talk to you about binge-worthy series and how to write them. So we are going to start with introductions. I am going to ask each of our authors to introduce themselves and to tell us in just 1 to 2 lines what their book is about. Let's start with Kiersten.
Hi, I am Kiersten White. I'm the author of 16 novels for teens and young readers. My most recent is The Guinevere Deception. It is a Camelot reimagined with Guinevere as the central character.
All right. Jay?
Hi everyone, my name is Kristoff. I am one half of the dynamic duo of Kaufman and Kristoff. Our latest book is called Aurora Burning, which is the sequel to Aurora Rising. Those of you who have read the first one will know the second one is about Squad 312 and the horrible things that are going to happen to them on the way to book 3.
All right, Amanda?
I am Amanda Joy. My book, A River of Royal Blood, is about a 16-year-old princess running for her life because her sister's trying to kill her because one of them, in order to win the crown, they have to kill the other.
Friendly.
Good old-fashioned murder time, yeah.
And Kat?
Hi, I'm Kat Cho, and I'm the author of Wicked Fox, which is based on Korean mythology of the Gumiho. And that's a 9-tailed fox that can turn into a beautiful woman to lure in men and prey on their energy to live forever. It's a fun, romantic romp. No, it's got lots of murder too. And then the sequel, Vicious Spirits, is out, and that's also based on Korean mythology. So lots of angst and Korean food.
2 of my favorite things. All right, so because this is going out to a wide audience, I don't want to assume that any of them know all of our books, but I am sure that by the end they're going to want to read all of your books. So we're going to make sure, we're going to start with a little getting to know the books and getting to know the stories, and then we will delve into all of the tricks that we use to mercilessly hook readers and keep them pinned to the page. So one of the ways I like to, I guess, to get a feel for a book is to go with the comparison that if you loved X, then you will love this story. And X can be a book or a movie or a TV show, or usually I joke and say a food, but Kat's already there. So that's exciting to me. But where would you start with? If you love X, then you will love this story. Maybe Amanda?
If you love princess wielding swords, you will enjoy this story for sure. If you love your heroines with a lot of toughness to them, you'll love A River of Royal Blood for sure.
If you like K-dramas, then you'll love my books because they're very, very K-drama inspired. I guess if you like paranormal romance, lots of fun romance, but also lots of family dynamics in them as well, and Korean food.
Kiersten?
If you loved Merlin, if you loved King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, or if you're currently enjoying Cursed, but you're like, can we please get a few more dynamic women characters? Congratulations, I wrote the series for you.
Oh dear, and Jay?
It kind of depends how old you are, I think, with us. So if you're more like my and Amy's age, our series is kind of like Breakfast Club goes to Starfleet Academy. So if you like the dynamics of those 2 things, you'll probably like the book. If you're a little younger, we describe it as Six of Crows meets Guardians of the Galaxy.
Ooh, both of those are really good.
Yeah, sure.
I love those comps.
All right, so before we get too much into the binge worthiness of the series, I want to talk a little bit about what went into creating them. Because I always think of stories as, now what do you Americans call it? We say fairy floss. Is it candy floss? The big thing.
Cotton candy.
Cotton candy.
Cotton candy, yeah.
What a weird thing to have different names for. So I always think of it a little like cotton candy. There's something there. There's some little spark or moment or question or what if that is the stick, and then slowly things accumulate around it until suddenly you have enough. This is going to be a story. Do you remember what that first spark was? The what if, or the question, or the thing that you wondered or noticed? Kat?
For this duology, it definitely was the fact that I felt like Korean dramas is just like young adult books, but in like visual format. And so I definitely wanted to write something that I could incorporate a lot of my Korean culture in order to play with Korean drama tropes and mix it with like young adults, like familiar stereotypes. And then I've always loved the myth of the Gumiho, which is probably one of the most famous Korean myths, like the one that's most well known. And it really, really reminded me of books that are out now where it takes like an immortal creature that survives from killing people and plunks them into a modern day setting and asks the moral question of like, how can you survive like that when we're so global, we're so connected to each other? How can you justify that and still keep a semblance of some type of humanity? So I really kind of wanted to answer that question, and it really helped that the Gumiho is always a female, and I really like the idea of the immortal creature being a girl.
I love that. And it is such an intriguing question, who do you become if you make those kind of necessary compromises over and over and over again? Do those compromises take you further from who you are over time?
Yeah.
And what
exactly.
if it's a very long time and a very large number of compromises? It's such a great question. Amanda, do you remember the first spark?
I do. I had been reading, my brother had been forcing me to read Wheel of Time, forcing me to read Wheel of Time. And there was this princess in there, actually she's not exactly a princess, more of an empress in waiting. And it discussed a lot about how her family was just trying to kill her constantly since she was next in line. And I really honed in on this idea of, well, what if your family is probably the people that you can actually trust the least? And that's really what I wanted to focus on, that sort of loss of really a grounding base for a character because they can't trust their family. And yeah, that's definitely what I ended up focusing on the most, I think.
Right. That's also really interesting because I guess, you hear it over and over and over in popular culture, this idea, family is everything, family comes first.
Right.
You've always got your family, no matter what, that's where you go back to. And when that is actually not a safe place,
exactly,
what does that do to you? Who do you become?
Yeah, and I think often in kidlit in general, we see when you have that terrible family dynamic, it may be off the page, but I really wanted it to be on the page with both the parents and with her sibling relationship.
Yeah, we are a little guilty in YA of taking the parents off the page early, often in quite brutal ways, because we need to give our characters enough agency to run around largely unsupervised.
We learned it from Disney.
Yeah,
we grew up with that.
Right, we didn't start it, it's not our fault. Kiersten?
Yeah, so my teens actually have complained to me that they have no tragic backstory, so they'll never be heroes or compete in extreme reality TV. So I'm sorry, children, I'm still here. So the Guinevere Deception is the first book of the Aurora Rising trilogy. It's a retelling, and I've done several retellings recently, and my retellings are always rooted in two things. how much I love the source material and how angry it makes me. And they have to be about equal levels. I have to really love it, but it has to also really piss me off. And Arthurian legends are a great example of that. Like there are so many versions of them, which makes it really ripe and fun for retelling because there's no canon. You're not taking, you know, a single source and changing it. You're taking stories that have been traded and told and elaborated on and changed for actual hundreds of years. And so there's a lot of freedom to play there with archetypes and characters. But also traditionally, and even in a lot of retellings, women get shaft. I mean, they're either not focused, or if they come into the story, they come to be the one girl in the story who is either the love interest or the tragedy, and you know, oftentimes both as well. And if they ever had two women in a single Arthurian legend, they were inevitably in competition with each other. And that bothers me because that's not reflective of reality. And I also looked at the Arthurian legends and how they always focus on, you know, the dude with the sword doing things with the sword, but never the people that was impacting around them, or what happened after he did the thing with the sword. And so I really wanted to explore the feminine power in Camelot and make it a very traditional telling where it is set in sort of a nebulously medieval England, but where I examine the women and I look at, you know, you are part of this kingdom that's moving on from magic, but who's being left behind in that? And yes, it's being built on justice, but who's choosing what justice and how it gets meted out? And so I think the initial spark, I had always known I wanted to do an Arthurian retelling, but the initial spark actually came after watching King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, that has one main female character, two total, and she doesn't even have a name. Her name is literally her role. She's the mage. She exists to support the men with her magic. And after she's won the kingdom for them, she literally disappears. And so, you know, I was mad. That's actually how most of my stories start. I was mad, so I decided to write a book. But yeah, I just really wanted to explore the feminine aspect of Camelot and create a world and a magic that would be the ways that women found to create power for themselves.
Yeah, I was mad, so I decided to write a book, which was a very long form type of revenge. But you trust me, when I get there, it's going to be brutal. I mean, I think there's, you know, I mean, I'm a nerd who's in the middle of a PhD on intersectional feminism in young adult fiction. So I think the sheer number of YA books that are essentially people looking at something they loved and going, but, and then a couple of years later saying, here, I fixed it. So, you know, whether that's we need women, or whether that's we need, you know, anyone who looks like me, or me being the author in that case, not me. They usually have plenty of people who look like me. But yeah, that sense of, I love you too much to let you make this mistake. I love you too much, story, to let you be this way. Jay, what about you?
I mean, the way we came to this story was kind of throwing a lot of the things that we loved as sci-fi nerds and kids into a mixing pot and see what kind of bubbled to the top. But I think the idea at the heart of Aurora is the squad, Squad 312, which is kind of like a found family. The way the setup of the book works is there's this place called Aurora Academy, which is the Starfleet Academy equivalent. There's a whole bunch of kind of elite students that get taken from all over the galaxy and thrown into this training program. And at the end of it, you get formed into squads and go out and kind of troubleshoot all over the galaxy. The idea behind our squad is they're kind of they're losers, or they're misfits, or they're outcasts in some way, shape or form, all of them. And they kind of get thrown into this problem together and have to learn how to work together. And I think, you know, I at least was a bit of an outcast in high school, so I always kind of like exploring the outcast dynamic. But the idea of throwing all these people together and see how they work in a situation that they weren't entirely expecting, growing together kind of as a found family unit, and then going out and saving the galaxy. That was kind of the core, I think, way you throw these, they're exceptional people in their own regard, but they all have a reason why they don't fit, and throwing them into a situation together where they're forced to work together, forced to overcome their differences, and go out and do a bigger and better thing than any of the individuals in that team would otherwise have comprised. So I think that was kind of at the core of it. But I don't know, what do you think? You also you helped to write the book, your name's on it too, so
I did the consonants, he did the vowels.
yeah, right.
I mean, there's a reason that the book is dedicated. The first book says, if you're still looking for your squad or they were hard to find, then this one's for you. And that's because, I mean, I don't think there's anyone who hasn't had that experience of feeling like an outcast, and it happens to all of us in different ways. And for some of us, no one else might suspect it, but everyone's had that feeling of being excluded, and everyone's had that feeling of feeling like they can't find the people who want to know their real self. So I think, one of the things that we all do as authors is let people know they're not alone by kind of getting naked on the page a bit and showing our own vulnerabilities, so that people, when they see someone encapsulate their own vulnerability, they realize they can't be the only one feeling that way. And I think as a young reader, that was very powerful for me. And frankly, as an older reader, it's still very powerful for me. So I think that's something that all of our books do. So we're here to talk about writing series and about writing binge-worthy books. So I suppose my first question is, what do you all think makes something really binge-worthy? Is it the cliffhanger? Is it the giant character arc? Is it the twists? Is it the fact that everybody is talking about it and you want to get in on that conversation? What is it that makes something feel binge-worthy to you? Maybe Kiersten, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, it's such a hard thing, right? Because there will be something that everybody's talking about and you'll try to get into it and it just won't click for you. And then you find some obscure show on Netflix and you're like, why isn't everybody watching this? And you text all of your friends and none of them watch it. But for me, I think it's a combination. It's a combination of connecting incredibly well with the characters immediately, so that I care so much about those characters that I have to know what's going to happen next. And then also that sense of urgency, because there are books that I enjoy, but I'm perfectly fine setting them down and walking away from them for a bit. And then there are those books where you hit a certain point and there is nothing you can do but keep reading. A book that happened with recently was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. It's a modern day real world setting, but it's got this level of fantasy layered onto it. And I liked it from the start. I really interesting. And then all of a sudden, at a certain point in the book, I realized I can do literally nothing but finish this book. Like, there is nothing else that I can do. And it was because she had hooked me so hard with those characters. And then all of a sudden, the stakes just kept building and building and building. So there was that combination of characters that I genuinely cared about, and then increasing urgency with every single chapter till it just felt like you're rolling down a hill. Like, you hit a certain momentum point and you cannot stop until you hit the bottom, or until Jay and Amy drop you off a cliff at the bottom.
Yeah,
that's a different story. So we'll get into that later.
It's true that moment when you realize, oh, there are other things I could and should be doing and I'm not going to do. I mean, of course, the problem is it's easy to say that, hard to do, or we would all do it all the time with every story. What about you, Kat? What makes it something that you cannot stop?
I definitely lean more towards characters, just because I have definitely read books where I really wanted to know like what was going to happen to the character, and I finished it and I realized there wasn't actually a plot to the book. It was just literally, I mean, okay, like this isn't even, this isn't even a guilty pleasure. I loved the Twilight series when it first came out. I was the perfect age for it. I was the core target audience.
It was the jam. I mean, we were there. It
Yeah,
was everything to us.
I binged those books. I was obsessed with them. I reread them over and over. But like, I think it's safe to say that literally nothing happens in the first book except for vampire baseball. And but at the same time, I was weirdly obsessed with it. And it's definitely because I was so connected to these characters at that time. And I really wanted good things to happen for them. And I wanted to see if what I was hoping would happen by the end of the series would happen. Like, I wanted Bella to become a vampire and I wanted Jacob to be happy. So I definitely do think it all does root in the characters, but I also think now that I'm like trying to analyze it to be more than just good characters, that I think there has to be a question that needs to be answered for the characters too. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a plot point, but like my question was, will Bella become a vampire? And like, that's the question I needed to have answered by the end of this series. So it's definitely like something that's a mystery or a question about the character that the reader has to find out.
Yeah, well, and I hadn't thought about this before, but hearing you say it, talk about that investment in the characters that will carry you past any lack of plot, makes me wonder a little about fan fiction as well. And that's not an insult to fan fiction. I am both a writer and a reader of fan fiction. But I think writers of fan fiction would be among the first to say that not a lot happens sometimes. And in fact, sometimes nothing happens, and that's the point. But it's that thing you're talking about of just being so invested in the characters that you just want to spend the time with them.
Exactly.
Amanda?
I agree. I really think character is, for me, what drives needing to finish a book. But piggybacking off what you said about vulnerability, I think that giving your characters that vulnerability so that a reader can truly latch onto them is really the key in making sure that they want to stay with that character. A character who's like pulling or hiding too much from the reader can almost alienate a reader, but the more vulnerability you give, the more invested readers are and the more they need to know like what's actually going to happen to this character.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right, so Jay, something slightly different because we're all talking about characters. So I'm going to switch it up on you after you've had time to think about what you wanted to say. What do you think happens? I mean, when it comes, because plot has a part to play in not being able to put the book down. What do you think makes what plot elements make something bingeable and unput downable?
I mean, for me, it kind of comes back to a little what Kat was saying before, the idea that there is a mystery, that there's a question here that I don't know the answer to. And that can be done in a number of ways. It can be a simple mystery, like, you know, who done it, who killed that rich heiress, or it can be a sense, you know, a growing and greater sense that what you thought was the case at the start of the series is not actually the case. These people have a deep, dark secret that you want to get to the bottom of. Or that this setting, there is something more to it than first you thought. There is more to the story or the characters or the environment that they're in than initially met the eye. And a good storyteller can kind of open that lens a little wider with every chapter or with every episode. And you get a sense that, oh, there's actually something much bigger below the surface of this iceberg that I thought was there. That's kind of what keeps me coming back time and time again, whether it be character-based or scenario-based or environment-based. If I get a sense that there's something more, and if I stick around for just a little bit longer, I will find out what that is. That will kind of keep me coming back. So yeah, it's that sense of mystery, the unknown, and being given hints that there is something more to it. But we're not going to give you everything yet because we want you to buy the next book or see the next movie or whatever.
Or read the next chapter when you're supposed to be going to sleep.
Right, that's exactly right.
We really, you know, we secretly like it when we wake up and you're tweeting at us in all caps. We secretly like the how could you tweets.
Yeah, but like a good writer, a good storyteller can do that on a chapter by chapter basis. They can they can open that lens just a little bit wider, or ask a new question that makes you want to know the answer. And you think, yeah, it's 2:00 in the morning, but I can read for 10 minutes more, or I can watch one more episode or whatever. So yeah, it's a matter of escalating that sense of, I'm going to get the answers that I want if I stick around for 5 more minutes.
Right. It's that thing that means that when Netflix pops up the "Are you still watching?" notification, you just scream, "Yes, don't judge me," click go, and then probably throw the remote. So, I mean, Kiersten already... Oh, sorry, Kiersten, you've got your hand up.
Oh, I just kind of wanted to piggyback a little bit off of that. When I wrote my very first YA novel, the end of every chapter was my characters going to sleep, because that felt like a very natural break for me. And a very wise friend, Stephanie Perkins, told me, when your characters go to sleep, you're giving your reader permission to close the book, because nothing is happening right then. So you're giving them permission to take a break. And so ever since she pointed that out, which is so true, I try to make sure that every chapter has its arc, just like every act in the book has its arc, and every book itself has its arc, but you always end the arc swinging up into the next one. So I look at the motion of the chapters like starting out, thinking, okay, we've resolved that. Now you're going to swing them up into the next chapter, whether that's, leaving that tantalizing line at the end that implies not all is as it seems, or like introducing the action of the next chapter. And with books themselves, you end the arc of that book, but you don't end it by closing the door. You end it by swinging them up into the next story. And I think that was such a crucial thing for my friend to point out, is just never give the reader permission to step away from the story, which if you're ending it, with them going to sleep, if you're ending it on a very resolved note in the chapter without any threads leading into the next one, then you're giving your reader permission to check out. And you don't want to do that. You want to keep them.
It's so true. I had nearly a decade ago now, when I was editing my very first book, got exactly that piece of feedback from my wonderful editor, who said, "I know you're quite pleased to have reached the end of the chapter and you would like a rest, but don't give the characters a rest, and don't give the readers a rest, because they'll put it down on their nightstand, they'll walk away." And yeah, and until then I had never realized that was what I was doing, but that was absolutely what I was doing. And that actually leads really nicely into the next question I was going to ask, which is, to what degree do you all think consciously about this when you're writing? Do you just draft, or do you think as you're going, how am I going to keep this person pinned to the page? Amanda?
I definitely think about it because I tend to plot, and then I tend to write a few chapters and then replot, and keep plotting as I'm drafting to make sure that the threads are woven to the point where they can stay on this, they have a thread to follow throughout the whole thing that is keeping them, like you said, asking those questions. So definitely plot is king to me. So I think I can't just draft blindly. I need to know where I'm taking my reader, and so I can get there.
How about you, Kat?
I definitely, I don't think about it so much as can the reader not put this down? It's more like, for my own sanity, I have to be entertained while I'm writing the book, or else I'm just going to stop writing it and try to work on something different. So I definitely try to make sure that I'm at least entertained, because then it's at least a story I would like to read, and that's the only thing that I can control at the time. And I also, but then after I go back to revise it, I take all of the complications and all the twists or all of the mysteries, and I try to amp those up more and be like, well, how can I make this even harder for the character to get out of? Because I think the thing that I definitely still do, and I think some writers tend to do is that we love our characters so much that we almost feel bad. We're like, oh, okay, well, you got abandoned, but your mom did love you. And it's like, no, you just got abandoned. You'll never know why. And you have to go that extra mile. Otherwise the story's too like even. It's like too much on an even plane. There's no ups and downs. So going back is when I make it more interesting, because I have to kind of, do all the things I was unwilling to do the first time around.
Oh, you are speaking my truth, Kat. You are speaking my truth. I have literally been known to murmur, I'm sorry, as I'm writing, because it's horrible and no one deserves this. What about you, Jay? Is it something that you're thinking about consciously as you write? I mean, I can tell you as someone who gets to read your chapters as you write them, I'm usually screaming halfway through, but is it deliberate or is it instinct?
It's something that's I've become more conscious of and deliberate about as I've written more books, I guess, and gotten better at the craft. But I try and end every chapter on a question, and I don't mean like a literal question, but putting a question in the reader's mind, I guess, and that can be, who is this person who has just arrived, or what are they going to do now that this terrible thing has happened, or what is this place they have just come to? It is kind of talking to that swing that Kiersten was mentioning before, swinging them up into the next block of story, leaving them hanging on some piece of information, either about the characters or the place or what they're trying to achieve, that will keep people reading along. But yeah, I've become a little more conscious of it the more that I've written. And I think I probably did it instinctually when I first began, but as I've become more conscious of how to hopefully keep people reading anyway, yeah, it's something that I deliberately trying to insert. It's a question that you want to leave in the reader's minds.
Yeah. So if we take that out to a larger scale, so we've talked about doing it on a chapter level and we've talked about doing it on a book level, but we're writing series. So the second book of a series is notorious in so many ways. It's notoriously hard for the author to write because often the author has as much time as they want for book one because they're happily sort of splashing around in the shallows, enjoying themselves and playing with book one. And then the series is sold to a publisher and the publisher's like, great, looking forward to book 2 in 6 months. And the author's like, wait, what? Oh, so quickly. All right. So it's often difficult in terms of that time pressure. It's also often, it's a linking book between book 1 and book 3. And in book 1, you can set it all up. And in book 3, you can blow it all up. But book 2 has to bridge without feeling like a boring bridge. Are there approaches that you take to try and keep book 2, as tight and exciting and hooky and pulley alongy as I suppose the opening of book 1 or the closing of book 3? Kiersten, you've done it possibly the most times of everyone on the panel?
Maybe. Jay's creeping up on me.
I'll get you in the end.
Neck and neck.
He'll violently get me in the end. So I actually have very specific theories about how to structure a series, depending on how many books it is. Currently, I'm working on how do you develop a 5 or 9 book series. So I'll get back to you on that one if I ever manage to sell someone on it. But for me, the most common structures in YA, although we're seeing more 4-book series, is either 2 or 3. And for a 2-book series, the way that I think, for me, the way that I structure it is book 1 asks a question and book 2 answers the question. So book 1, you're setting up the characters, you're setting up the world, you're setting up the big question, and then book 2 is resolving it and answering it. But if you're writing a trilogy, the way that I've always looked at it and that I've tried to structure my trilogies so that you avoid that, wow, book 2 really didn't need to be here, or wow, books 2 and 3 were the same book twice, new moon eclipse. You just have to structure them a very specific way. And for me, that way is book 1, your character knows what they want and you give it to them at the end of the book. Book 2 is, oh no, that thing that I thought I wanted and I got is not actually what I wanted. And my journey through book 2 is working through that and figuring out what I really want. And book 3 is making them walk through hell to get what they had to spend book 2 learning is what they really want, right? So book 1 is, this is the setup, they did it. Book 2 is, oh no, they really didn't do it. And then book 3 is, now they know what they actually have to do. And that way, for me, the bulk of the momentum and the growth in book 2 is not necessarily plot, because you can only move the plot forward so much without resolving everything. It's more about character growth and character progression, getting your characters to the point where they're ready for the stakes and the resolution of book 3.
Right. Well, I mean, this certainly explains a lot about why I can't stop reading really all of your books. I didn't know that I was being scientifically manipulated though, so I'm going to have to give some thought to processing how I feel about that. Amanda, what's your approach?
Well, this was the first time I've written a sequel, which was truly harrowing, and it was a duology. And like Kiersten said, I really agree with that. Sort of, you're asking this question in that first book, you're asking all these questions and getting those answers in book 2. However, it still needs to balance with there being enough plot for the reader to feel like this was worth my time. Like sometimes it can just feel like one long resolution, which I truly hate. So there's also trying to introduce some more questions along with answering the great thematic questions of the first book. But yeah, it was something, all right, I'll say. Yeah, it's definitely a different experience than writing that first book.
So the good news is it never gets easier.
Oh yeah.
No, that's the bad news. There is no good news. The good news is you're in good company.
Well, you know, the good news is that it is this bad, and it's just gonna be this bad. And so, well,
just
now you know
it.
And now I know. It is what it is.
But I mean, you're dead right. Like what you want is for everything that happens in book 1 to feel as big and intense and immediate as it can. And then in book 2, you want the characters to look back on book 1 and go, oh, my sweet summer child, that was not a problem. This is a problem.
This is a problem, yeah.
Kat, what were you thinking about as you got into book 2?
So mine's a duology as well, and it's also my debut series. So yay, Amanda, newbie team. So I think one of the things when it's kind of, this is a little bit behind the scenes about the industry too, is like, as everyone knows, is when you're first querying or subbing your book, you're supposed to kind of have it be able to be standalone just in case. So, and especially because my book has very heavy romance elements, I wanted to be able to show like these characters can be together by the end of book 1. But then when it sold as a duology, my issue was like, the thing I hate the most is contrived reasons for the relationship to be broken up in the beginning of book 2, just so that they can find their way back together at the end. So I didn't want to cheat, but at the same time, I was like, what's more interesting than breaking up, you know, like when it comes to relationships. So that was really hard for me. And I think that I cheated and I introduced a new couple in the second book. And the thing with that though, and I think goes back to my answer of being like characters are really what drive me, is that these were 2 characters that while I was writing them as side characters in book 1, I wanted to know more about them. I wanted to be able to like explore why they were doing what they were doing in book 1. And by making them main characters in book 2, I got to look into their backstory and then also play with how their backstory intermixes with the current ongoing story for the 2 main characters from book 1 who are still present. And then it made kind of like an interesting new mix that kind of, even though there was still that whole like relationship angst tension, there was still all this extra relationships like friendships and families and found families that was peppered in to keep it from getting too formulaic and boring.
Right, but I mean, so it's an expansion. Like it is that feeling of looking back at book 1 and going, "Oh, my sweet summer child," because book 1 is a romance, and the reader goes, "Wow, that was an intense romance." Book 2 is a relationship spider web.
Yes.
And you suddenly realize that thing I thought was big and complex, I've zoomed out and it wasn't at all, you know, it was when I was in it, but now look how much more there is, and look how much more complicated I can make it.
Exactly.
And look how many cards Kat has pinned to her wall, and bits of string, and look at Kat slowly descending into madness as she tries to track how everyone feels about everyone else. Or maybe that's
my conspiracy board.
Jay, how do you approach it, keeping people in it through a book too?
I mean, I'm a bit of a freak. Book twos are my favorites to write in when you're talking about trilogies anyway. I've only ever written trilogies, but it goes back to what Kiersten was saying before. Book two has this inherent tragedy built into the structure of the story, in the sense that, oh, that thing you thought you wanted in book one is not what you wanted at all, or the way you thought the world works, you actually have no idea how the world works, or this quest that you're on, you thought you had succeeded at, actually you've only taken the first step into a much bigger world. So the discovery of that and the revelation that lies at the heart of that, and the inevitable angst that comes out of that, you know, this person you thought you knew was not who you thought they were at all, or the enemy that you thought you had defeated has come back bigger and stronger than ever. There's kind of a sense of heartbreak and angst and sorrow in that I really like in terms of the structure. So yeah, you get a sense that the universe or the world or the setting is much bigger than you first thought it was, that you as the reader and the character that you are journeying on is only just beginning to learn about this problem that they're trying to solve. So there's this kind of ramping up in terms of scope. Like this problem is much bigger than we thought it was, or this person I thought I knew is not who I thought they were. So yeah, that to me, there's some really cool storytelling dynamics that you can kind of take advantage of. And also book two, you know, like the guys were saying, book one should kind of exist in and of itself. It should be a complete arc. Whereas because with book two, if you're writing a trilogy, you know there's going to be a third one. There has to be a bigger and better battle at the end of it. Book two, by its nature, has to be a sort of cliffhanger. You have to leave some of the questions unanswered, some of the plot unresolved. And, you know, cliffhangers are really fun to write because you know you're inevitably going to get all caps tweets from people at 3 o'clock in the morning screaming, no, there's got to be 5 more pages in this book, right? They left the last chapter out of my copy. Where is it? So yeah, there's a cool sense of angst and escalation that's just built into the bones of the second act in the 3-act structure that I actually really enjoy. So I know I'm probably alone when I say that to a lot of writers. Everyone hates book two. They kind of call it the flabby middle, but to me, that's where the real questions get revealed, where the reality of the situation kind of gets cracked wide. So there's a lot of fun in that for me as a storyteller.
I had a friend once who told me that if there's a trilogy that you love, that's like choose like the trilogy that's your favorite trilogy, and the middle book will probably be your favorite because it's done well. Like that's why it's your favorite, because the second book is the best book.
Yeah, agreed.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right. In the ones that I love the most,
book two is always the best. Book two, best to read, I think, as a reader. Of course, I'm reminded as you speak of all the terrors you commit that Dark Dawn is sitting right behind me, and that sequel, holy crap! Yeah, that was a lot of violence against me as a reader that I just think, you know, wow, outdid yourself.
On behalf of readers everywhere, how dare?
Yeah,
like how dare.
But yeah, that's true. I'm thinking about them now. All my favorite trilogies, book two or movie two is my fave. Yeah,
because it's done right.
That's when the twist happens. Yeah, that's when you have the oh my god moment, the Luke, I am your father moment. Like that's probably the most famous that I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, it's true. I had never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think with duologies, I almost always love the second book the most because you don't have to save anything. You know, you can blow it all up. You don't need anything left at the end, so it allows for that huge expansion. You know, the expansion Kat was talking about, where you do, you know, you're adding in relationships, you're adding in complexities, you're adding in, you know, the spider web of found family, and everything else beyond romance. And at the end of the day, you can walk away from it. There it is, you know, enjoy. I don't need to have saved any fuel for next time. So we love duologies and trilogies is what we're saying. I mean, I do. I've written multiples of both, which is, I'm having so much fun listening to you all that I've just spotted the time and realized that we need to wrap up. I could quite honestly sit here all day listening to all of you talk, and I suspect that the audience watching is going to feel the same. But I think we better be good. So I am going to wrap up by asking each of you to recommend one thing that you've binged recently or you are binging right now that you absolutely love, and to tell us what's up next for you as well. So Kiersten.
Yeah, so okay. One thing that I've binged lately that I've loved, book series, and I'm not kissing it because you guys already know I love you, but Aurora, my girl Aurora, Aurora Rising loved, Aurora Burning came, and I'm like, am I close enough to threaten them if they don't send me book 3 early? Unfortunately, geographically, you're very far away, so I'm not sure if the threats would really be scary enough. But you have seen me at 4 in the morning. No, I'm scary. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have 4 in the morning, but you are also literally half Jay's size. Like, she comes up to his waist.
It's true. It's true. And then what I'm working on right now, so Guinevere Deception came out in November. The Camelot Betrayal, which is book 2, comes out in November, on November 10th. And I am neck deep in revisions on book 3. So it's all Camelot all the time around here, but really excited about this one. Because yeah, this is my book 2. And this is where I got to say, I've already established the world. I've already established the characters. Everything's going to go nuts. And it did. And it was so much fun to write. So yeah, that's what I've got going on.
All right, Kat?
Recommendations. I'm so bad at this because I want to recommend multiple things, so I will.
I mean, I think if you're on the book panel, I don't think the readers watching are going to be like, oh, I was with her till she recommended 3 books. And then...
Okay, I really love Christine Lynn Herman's debut duology. The Devouring Grey is the first book, and talk about character-based stories, moody, atmospheric, so good. It's like Stranger Things in upstate New York with like town secrets. I also really love anything by Zoraida Cordova. I just think her writing is really lush and beautiful. Recommend anything. Incendiary is her most recent book, and she's finishing a trilogy this year as well, I think. And then I'm gonna go a little bit off the book path and just say I just binge watched She-Ra on Netflix.
Nice.
It is so good. And it also goes along with the whole character thing because I'd watched a few of the like original She-Ra when I was like really young. And you know, back in like the 80s, like everybody who's a good character is wholly good and everyone who's a bad guy is like so evil and they have the evil laugh. But the revamp was like, nope, sometimes the good guys make mistakes for bad reasons, and sometimes the bad guys, like Kat Cho was one of my favorite characters, sometimes they deserve some love too. So I really loved that.
Oh, and the romance. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, so good.
We can assemble later for a She-Ra panel.
Yeah, for sure.
And what are you working on right now?
It's not announced yet, so I don't think I'm allowed to say it, but
That's look tantalizing.
I know. Ooh, stay tuned. But yeah, Vicious Spirits just came out, and so this is my most recent baby.
Excellent. Amanda?
As far as reading, I completely fell in love with 2 like new 2020 books that are coming out. I think Lobizona, I think they're both actually coming out this month. Lobizona by Romina Garber. Amazing, just amazing, trope breaking, trope shattering, brilliant, everything you could want. And then also Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. So good, so good. The language is so musical and lyrical, and the world is amazing because it's centered on Africa, but it's actually a global world. So it has all these continents that have sort of their analog in the real world. But instead of sort of seeing these empires, obviously, that are centered in the West, we have an entire empire that's centered on a Nigeria-inspired country, which is amazing. And then since I've just turned in copy edits on book 2, which is done now, basically, praise be, I have been binging a ton of anime. I've been binging Hunter x Hunter because the thing that I'm working on next has two main characters that are good friends, and I really want to mimic that dynamic that's in Hunter. That's what I've been up to.
Anytime you can watch anime and call it homework, you have worked
exactly.
out.
That's what I have been shaping my life around, that ideal, actually.
You've ascended to your final form early in your career, and I salute you.
I'm blessed.
What about you, Jay?
I just finished this last night. This is First Sister by Lyndon Lewis. It comes out at the start of August. I'm a traditionally really slow reader. The last book that I read before this, it took me 2 weeks to read it, and it's like a 240-page novel. And I smashed this in 2 days. It's actually super cool, super smart sci-fi. I want to talk about it, but I don't want to be a spoiler about it. But suffice to say, it's amazing. I think it's my favorite YA book that I read this year. It's been sitting on my desk for like months, just kind of looking at me at the corner of my eye. And yeah, I picked it up 2 days ago and smashed it in 2 days. It's actually super great, and I can't recommend it enough. And next on the list,
and kind of fantastically queer space opera.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. I can't recommend it enough.
But shut up, because I see what you're holding.
Yeah, well, I haven't started it yet. I'm starting this next. This is The Other Side of the Sky, which is Amy and Megan Spooner, her other co-authors' next book. This arrived from Alan Unwin in the post this week. So this is next on the list. And in terms of series, I just watched The Last Dance, which is a Netflix documentary about the Chicago Bulls doing back-to-back hat tricks back in the 90s when Michael Jordan was kind of the epicenter of the team. And it's amazing. Again, I usually don't binge series, but I watched the whole thing in like 2 days. I had no idea Michael Jordan was Slytherin, but like he is super Slytherin.
Oh, he's not a Slytherin. He's the Slytherin.
Oh, man.
He's the mold, okay?
It was so good though. Like every episode, he was kind of meaner and meaner, and I just loved him more and more. It was just great. That's great. And as to what I'm working on now, I am back on the edits for Empire of the Vampire, which is my new epic fantasy. It's starting next year. It's kind of the spiritual successor for Nevernight, so it's kind of grimdark, epic adult fantasy. It's set in a world where the sunlight has kind of failed, and vampires have figured out they can walk around during the day, so they kind of slowly rise up around this medieval kingdom and start to take it over. And it's centered around a man named Gabriel, who was a member of a order of vampire hunters that has subsequently been destroyed, and he's kind of telling his life story. So it's kind of big and grim and dark, and I love it a lot. So yeah, I'm editing that at the moment. It's out September next year.
Don't worry, it's going to end happily though. It's going to end beautifully with a group hug. Everything will be fine.
It's brutal. I have to warn people about this one before they go into it. It's the most brutal thing that I've written, but I had a lot of fun writing.
Holy shit!
I'm very proud of it. So.
Oh man! Well, on that uplifting note, we're out of time, so we have to wrap up. I would say a huge thank you. I'm going to remind you again, readers, your panelists have been Kiersten White, Kat Cho, Amanda Joy, and Jay Kristoff. And I've just realized, after trying so hard, I've really screwed with our poor ASL interpreter there, and I'm sorry for reeling off a million names at once. My name is Amie Kaufman, and this has been Binge-Worthy series and how to write them. We really hope you have enjoyed it, and we hope you enjoy your summer of reading.